All right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to this discussion on Margaret Mascarenhas' novel, first novel actually, Skin. It was first published, of course, in 2001, so it's a bit, it's like 19 years old. It was a first novel, and as first novels, and I think that is something that we must keep in mind when you're discussing a writer, because her descriptions are very wonderful and really evocative, and they really transport you to wherever she is. Having said that, do keep in mind that it is very little erratic in the way it goes back and forth. What is she really focusing on? The focus is a little off, I feel. So we'll look at that. Very quickly, the theme that she's talking on, her lens is turned on Christianity and nuns, skin color, Africa, Angola, the slavery, African descent in Goa, and the perils of beauty, and of course that's in there in the title. And let's also take up this, the term saudade, which is a longing, for a lost way of life, other than being a proper noun in this novel, a longing for a lost way of life, she's nostalgic about Goa and Goans losing this way of life, and yet it is also very flawed. The whole patriarchy, the upper classes, and the aristocracy that she is turning her lens on. Okay, so let's just plunge into it. Just another thing is that I find the structure was a little erratic. There are some sections which have as many as 14, different parts. Some which have only 2 or 3. So it was a little. It is a little over the place. But remember, of course, that it's a first novel, and okay. So having taken that, I think just made a very brief. Let's go ahead. And anyone who wants to lead on any of the things that I may have showcased or something else, whatever you feel like, just feel free to jump in. So who's here? I think.
Also ask first we say that to celebrate the life here.
All right. Sorry. Yeah. So it was really a little sad that nobody really. She went very gently into the good night. Actually, nobody really. It was a shock. Okay, and she died in 2019, 19 July 2019. And she went really quietly, gently to the good night. And it was really sad that nobody really thought about it. And it actually all hit all of us. In fact, even I was thinking about it when we had the Wendell meeting and the sharing, that why did we do it for Margaret? Okay, so that is, of course, something that I think we are honoring her by meeting today, and let's dedicate this sharing today to her. Yeah, so we are good to go. Stephen, I think I invited you. Would you like to start? We'll lead the discussion, and then Savia, take it up from there.
You are talking about the edition, first edition. That is the 2001, is it? You haven't read the new edition, the second one?
No, I read the new edition, but I'm just saying that as a book, it was first published in 2001.
Yeah, but there's a major difference apparently according to the thing and the blurb, as well as what is said in an interview 2 years ago, where she said that she's going in for the second edition because the first one was a mistake. It was the penultimate edition, that version that went out of printing by mistake, and now she says she's corrected that. If you notice the.
Yeah, I read that, and I read the 2001 when it came out, I think in 2002, and I read the one, and actually I finished reading the new one just today, but I really didn't find much of a, there's not much of a.
Okay. I wanted to know that. There is.
No, there isn't really,
Okay.
There isn't really, yeah. In fact, I think there are some parts maybe that have been edited out, because there's a little more rambling. When I finished it and I was reading it over the week, I thought it was like quite tight and fine. Because I think the earlier one was even more, a little rambling, and it's sort of, so many of the sections maybe that I'm finding now, which are only 2 and all, may have been editorial cuts. making the novel much tighter, and a much better product, because
Yeah.
it's difficult for writers to let go of anything they have written. Yeah.
Because in
Yeah.
that sense, it doesn't become a first novel then. That's what I'm saying. The second edition becomes actually a maybe second or third, I think. Of us. So one of them is a poetry collection. Tri-age, I
Yeah,
think. No?
try-ish, yeah.
And then there's a novel in between. So probably she had a
The
little bit more
Irene
experience in
Dos
something.
Santos, yeah, the disappearance of Irene Dos Santos. But it's just
Yeah.
a different version. I would still, anyway, I would still say it is her.
Raining.
But go ahead, Stanley. Yeah.
No, that's about all I wanted to ask you. Then,
Uh,
of course, the relevance of skin, it has to be brought out somewhere. I think Xavier probably will be able to tell us that. What is the relevance of skin, the title? Yeah.
okay, Savia.
Yeah. I'm very happy we are discussing skin by just one second. I have to unmute. Yeah. Because I think it's important to celebrate. It is important to celebrate Margaret's life. She lived a short life, and she was one of the novelists who wrote in English and really looked at Goan society, looked at the different connections Goans have with US, abroad, the Africa, for example, the slave trade, and those connections, the way she made them, even though she was so young, and were very important because it gave the novel a larger canvas. I knew Margaret as a friend, and for me, it's very important to say she was one of the very strong women's voices on the writers' group. And very often, whenever there were issues that came up of patriarchy, of women writers, men writers, she was vociferous. I remember also that when I had my exhibition of paintings in 2014, we did the discussion together. So it leaves behind some very fond memories of a woman who was a writer, a painter, a poet, a musician, a singer, and so many other things. Also, interior designer, and a strong voice in Goa. She chose to live in Goa and do so many things on the cultural front. I read this book in 2001 along with A God of Small Things. And they were the two inspirations for me to spur my work, whether it was Tales from the Attic or let me tell you about Kinta, because I was looking basically for a narrative. And these two books kind of cleared in my mind what I could write. Margaret's book was very important because it was closer to home. And it was a narrative that probably located the elites in a Goan setting and looked at looked at the canvas of their lives with regard to cultural things like disht, like ownership of land, like relationship. And the more I read about her work, I was finding it problematic to relate at some points to the way she valorized these hierarchies at times. At times, there's a lot of heroism that is introduced with regard to these characters, where she misses the kind of, where she misses the link between how the lower segments looked at the upper class, for example. It's a very strong upper class voice. But then she was once so young, she opened up actually Pandora's box and allowed other stories to flow. So I think skin is a reference to how much importance we give to color. Okay. And it's a recurring theme in her, this thing, because you will see that though it's a story about Goans, there are so many inner things that that come to that are understated, but you come to understand as the novel progresses. I was very uncomfortable with the way she used that Gorgod character. because it was something I couldn't understand. The whole thing about the body descriptions, the missing navel and stuff like that. But it's probably a theme she has picked up from African fiction, because I remember reading some African stories regarding women who didn't have a navel, regarding women who didn't have one breast, and also the issue of the goddess. That wasn't such a I found it difficult to relate, because I think she researched on it so well that she created a kind of a very strong reality about the goddess, which I didn't know whether it really was something that was so strong in Goan understanding of the whole relationship with Africa and slave trade. Yes, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Just a correction, Savia.
Yeah.
It's not navel, it's nipple. Navel is the place where the baby is tied with the umbilical cord. So everybody has to have a navel.
No, I get that. But this African woman did not have a navel in an African story. In her
She did not have a nipple.
No, she didn't have a navel. So it's the missing of the body parts is probably something which is a recurring theme in African fiction. In her case, it is a missing nipple. But in that other woman's story, she didn't have a navel. It also shows that you don't have a biological connection. It's another way of, I suppose, positing the goddess identity.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Siana. That intervention was very important. Thanks. Yeah.
Not Siona,
Savia.
Preeti.
Preeti.
Savia, there's one question.
Sorry, so sorry.
Yes,
Savia, there's one question. Savia. See, the skin that she talks about is not always about color. It's also, the time when she talks about how the mother gets into your skin and you get into the skin of your mother. That
yes.
under the skin.
Yes.
That
yes, you're very right.
is important.
Yes.
It's not just a racial business.
Yes, it's multiple, actually. Correct. You're right.
It's like no matter how much the father may try to control their lives, the children are finally have this connection with the mother. Preeti, would you like to go? Dr. Preeti? Would you like to say something?
Yeah. There was about the skin, because the name was Skin. So I actually had to read the book twice because I couldn't want to find the connection that Pagan and Maria were the same person. So when I read it the second time, I actually drew out the family tree and then connected it and realized that Maria was the progeny of the Bernard, the fellow who was dealing with traders, and the Pagan was a progeny of the lady, because the green eyes came from the Jesuit priest. So it was like they crossed somewhere on the way. So it was difficult to comprehend because all that is explained only in the last few pages. Secondly, about the skin, there were different kind of references to the skin. The first thing, it started with the aunt Sarah. She compared her to her father, who didn't have the same light skin and green eyes. The second time, they said that the light skin and green eyes gave the Saraswat Brahmins preference. The Portuguese preferred them and gave them all that, they were accepted better by the Portuguese. Then in the next comparison in the skin was in the darkness of the night. Gorgor said that the color of the skin didn't matter in his wife, although he didn't like her color of the skin. So again, the reference to the skin. Then again, when Pagan made love to Shiko, again, she said that she felt like she was swimming in some warm, frothy cappuccino. So the color of the color of his skin, she compared the color of coffee to the color of his skin, but she liked it. So there was a liking to the darker color. And then in the school, she was preferred because she said the lightness of her skin, those girls always were given the preference. And so because she was the whitest, she was treated the best. And the grandmother Gina also told her that besides your name, the color of your skin is what brings you to power, and you get all your acceptance. But in the end, the grandmother pretends not to recognize her because of the color of her skin, because she had got tanned. And that grandmother, who actually, like, everything was skin for her, like, she felt that she was aristocratic because of her skin. At the end, they say that she was so proud of her skin, but what was her skin? It was mottled and gray, and all the light had gone out of it. So I don't know what the author tries to tell us, but she's trying to show that the good skin is actually reduced to nothing. So that skin really doesn't matter. I think I got that impression. And then about the dreams, she had the two dreams that were important. One was that this pagan dreamt about Saudade, and that she had no leg. I don't know how she connected it. And then the other part, when the children jumped into that painting, again, she saw the young Esperanza without a leg. So I don't know how that sort of related to it, but maybe somebody else can explain that. That's what I wanted to say.
Rahul, would you like to jump in? Now, I can't see anyone else except for Tavia, Preeti, and Stanley
Oh,
on
cool.
my screen. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Roxanne, and thank you to all of you who have spoken so far, because it's such an interesting book. So if you ask me, like I was chatting with Savia a few days ago, I found the book very interesting. I think Margaret was indeed a fascinating storyteller. In the sense that if you read it from end to end, as all of us have done, I'm amazed at the way she takes you from Goa to the US, I mean, as in America, and brings you, there's a bit of Angola, of course, but brings you back to Goa, and, and back and forth with such ease, and from one family to the other family. What I found fascinating is how she compares her mother's side of the family with the father's side of the family. So that those comparisons also very interesting, because one is American and one is Goan, and so that comes out very well. Very interestingly, she's brought that out. By the way, in about 5, 6, 7 minutes, the line might get cut, but just rejoin by clicking on that blue hyperlink. That's the only inconvenience, but don't worry. Okay, so I'll carry on. I have tagged some portions of the book, because I thought, I would just read out. I mean, all of us have read it, but I still wanted to read out some portions which I found very interesting, like this portion, right at the back, 220, page number 220, the death of the Goan grandmother. And she talks about the funeral, and then she, talks about her American grandmother. But let me read it out. It said, it had been so different when Big Mama died of a sudden and massive heart attack, the Easter before she received her master's degree in communications. One moment, Big Mama had been standing in the kitchen, humming a made-up tune to herself, making blueberry preserves for Pagan to take back to Berkeley. The next moment, she was gone. Pagan had spent the night at the funeral parlor. She held her grandmother's hand and read her master's thesis, mass media, the new colonialism out aloud. Such intimacies, displays of raw grief were out of question with Gina. With Gina, appearances were everything, and decorum took precedence over love. After the mass, the coffin is closed. There is yet another procession to the cemetery, more prayers. Whatever, and now I have no grandmothers. Pagan writes to Olga. This little thing about she's at the Goan grandmother's funeral, and she's recounting this, and then she speaks about a Big Mama in the US who had passed away quite suddenly, and she draws a comparison between the two grandmothers. I find that very fascinating. She's done it with other characters also, really.
Yes.
She's done it with other characters, and I found that very interesting. There are some other portions, but I could read a little later. But the point is, one of the things that impressed me is that her command over the language. She certainly has a command over the English language.
Absolutely.
Clearly, she's very strong with the language, and she has used it very evocatively. Meaning to explain, especially to explain moods, to explain climax situations, or even sexual encounters. She uses the language very deftly. I mean, there are writers and writers who struggle with the language. Sometimes. I mean, they could. Some writers could be, clumsy and all that. But this Margaret is a writer who is definitely inspirational. For somebody like me also, who's been a journalist, that she, with minimal words, she's able to. The turn of phrase is very strong. And she's able to explain something very easily, like a walk to the beach and sitting under the tree and holding each other's hands, but and looking at the moods, and then shifting about that nudist beach that she spoke about. Very, very. She's able to actually create the picture in front of your eyes, and I think that's the sign of a good storyteller.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes,
I'll come back.
totally. Yeah, absolutely, Rahul. I mean, that's really one of the key skills that she really demonstrates. And her descriptions are absolutely brilliant. Very graphic, very evocative. I can't see anyone else on my screen at the moment, but I think Siona had joined.
Welcome, Lizanne. Lizanne, she's a new member.
Lizanne is here. Rahul, you have.
No, Lizanne had joined, but she's seems to have dropped out for some reason. Rujuta is coming back. Rujuta is coming back. I think they're losing the some connection or something. But in any case, in 1.5 minutes, we all get knocked off and we have to rejoin again. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay.
Rujuta has come back. But you know what? I think So Roxanne, I think you just continue a little because
I think
lose.
So we talked about, for those who are just joining in, we talked about her description. We talked about the importance of the title, the skin, and how it is throughout the novel. She is foregrounding that as very important. But together with skin, like Dr. Preeti was talking about, she also talks about the perils of beauty. So it's that is also another thing that she is making kind of a covert the subtext about girls who are beautiful fall into difficult situations. And here, of course, she's talking about misgeneration and falling in love with the wrong people and having children out of wedlock and things like that. Okay. Rahul, we keep thinking it's going to cut off, but it's not. So I think we are good over there. All right. Her African description, all her descriptions are fantastic, But in Africa, remember that she's a little lost. I find a little lost because when she talks with Angola, this is about the civil war in Angola. To start off, and then Rujita will take off.
I'll just say a little bit. I really missed out on a family tree because in between I was getting lost who is who. I'm not too strong in that field. But when I read Quinta, it was there as a ready reference, so it was very convenient. Another thing that I just struck me was that I found that pagans in the beginning didn't know her own identity. And she describes it like, I'm like an onion, having many layers, one skin over the other. So that during the whole book, till the end, I was thinking that she doesn't know herself, and she was trying to find herself in all the circumstances that she's trying to describe in across all the countries that which are mentioned, or across all the generations that were coming. Where does she stand? So every generational thing was like a layer on herself. So it was multiple layers of skin over herself that she was trying to sort of tell us, is what I thought. But overall, it was a very nice read. and it was a lot of quite a bit of suspense. You didn't know how this whole thing is going to connect because there were so many cross-country references. You didn't know how they would all come together, but it was at the end. It was really gripping, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, that's much from me.
Thank you, Siona. Preeti, Rujita?
Yeah, I completely, yeah, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I completely agree with Siona. I really required a family tree because by the end, I really had lost touch with what was happening in the sense, how is everyone connected? I kept on forgetting the names and how they would connect. Dr. Preeti mentioned in between about she being Maria being from a different father and from that lineage and finally pagan being from another
To
lineage.
send a message to Rahul.
The significance of that, but I agree with what everyone has said. The other thing that I would like to add in terms of the term skin is it's the same thing that keeps repeating, right? Just because a person looks beautiful or has great skin or the complexion does not equate to them being a great person. So you find that a lot of characters in the novel who have pride themselves in having great skin don't exhibit the kind of characteristics that you would expect from a person who is a nice person. On the other hand, the people who might be who are on the lower rung of society in terms of caste and things like that, or skin color, might have a better heart or soul, so as to say. So skin and how, yeah, what do you say, skin deep, that's it. It doesn't go into your soul basically. So that is what I picked up from the novel. uh, her uh, her abandonment issues, her issues dealing with not having later on in life, not having a secure place to call home, where her cousin or her aunt points out and says your father is Hindi, and then she starts getting those nightmares. So she does not know, she does not have roots for a long time. uh, when she's brought to India, she would rather stay with her American grandmother. So it's that whole crisis of or that whole mixing up of roots and where do you belong, and where what do you call home, and do you make a home of your of places where you finally go, or you make homes into people that you finally know, or what, the concept of that is also something that touched. And the final thing that really broke my heart was it's shown that her father, her actual father, is such a horrible person, and she finds out in the end that he is her father and the mastermind of her grandmother to this sick game of making the second son adopt the first son adopt her, uh, just to kind of keep the genes in the family. The kind of what do you call it, crisis, not crisis, the pain and what she must have felt of trying to escape from this, trying to make a life of her own in some other way. And like she's fighting to, when she finds out she's pregnant, she's not willing to accept it. She wants to go away from it. She's thinking about telling Esperanza to give her something to kind of abort the baby, to a point where she finally accepts them and cannot really think of a life without them. So many different stages in this girl's life, so many different crises and issues that she's dealing with, and finally coming out stronger and being able to, she's calling Brazil also a home, and then Goa also a home, and having that kind of what do you call it, like a steer, what is the word, balance, no, like a, can someone help me out?
Anchor.
Yes, anchor. Yes,
She wants to be anchored somewhere.
yes,
Yeah.
she wants to be anchored somewhere.
Yeah. That is sorry, continue, Siona.
No, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah. So that is the experience of a lot of people, right, today with, um, when a diasporic immigrant, mixed marriages, coming from different cultures and backgrounds, what we do to our children when we decide to, the move in many ways, right? I just wanted to clarify because, like what you said about the pain that she's going through about her pregnancy, that is Saudat. That is not pagan. Yeah, it is it is Esperanza's daughter who has to give up her twins, right?
No, I didn't mean that pain. I meant in the sense where the doctor comes in to check because she faints, and then he says it's good news, and she just refuses to,
yeah,
accept
okay.
it basically.
Accept
And
that
then
she is pregnant.
she's thinking there's a mention where she says that Esperanza will know what to do and how to get rid of it. So she's at the point where, yeah, she wants to get.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So finally, then where they become her anchors, that's how it is. It goes in the end, where she cannot think of her life without them. That's how it ends, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Would anyone like to take up any thread? Shall we talk about Siona spoke? Would Siona like to say something? Siona spoke. Siona spoke.
Nice book.
Yeah. Is Lizanne here? Is Lizanne left? Has she
No,
left?
Lizanne is not there. No.
Oh, okay. Would somebody like to talk about the lens that she turns onto Christianity and nuns? Okay. Actually, I like the nuns that she described. I hope they made them with so much gumption today, and the way in which they connive and, with the young sister Mary Magdalene, and, through the back door, support all her efforts at, working with the people who really need to be worked with, which otherwise very often the Catholic Church pretends to be working for, but doesn't manage to get to. Yeah. Rahul.
Yeah, a very interesting point, really, Roxanne. Thank you. I found that, when I started reading about Mary Magdalene, when the first encounter that Pagan had with her as a child, as a teenager, and then later on. What I found interesting is I found clearly parallels with Mother Teresa's or Saint Teresa's life.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes,
straight away.
yes.
So obviously Margaret had also that in mind. I'm just presuming, of course, complete presumption, but strongly I feel that Margaret, having read about Mother Teresa and all that, so she's brought in that Mother Teresa parallel. I'll tell you why. Because in real life also, with Mother Teresa, as most of you know, Mother Teresa was part of a certain order that brought her to India. You see, from Albania, and she was working with this order in this West Bengal school, and then she decided that she wanted to do more, and she took permission, and it was granted ultimately, that she would move out of the order technically and start working with the destitute, impoverished, children and orphans and what have you, just destitutes. And it was completely, her order was about education. Those nuns were meant to run schools. So she was trained to run schools, but she chose a different path and she was allowed to do that. And she started the missionaries of charity. And here also, the author has used that word quite close to missionaries of charity, if you remember. I don't remember what it is, but she said sisters of charity or something like that. I don't remember the exact word, but so it's a clear parallel. It's very, very, I found it very interesting. It has that.
Yeah. Very interesting, Rahul. And also she, sort of makes us subtext is about how Christianity had destroyed ancient ways of life, in many ways. And so Mary Magdalene allows these, the Indians she doesn't, her focus is not on conversion. She never converts a single person. That's like wishful thinking probably on Margaret's, this. But interesting, just like the example you gave of Mother Teresa, there are many examples like that. There is a sister who has Sister Valentina's home in Kolva, who actually left her order, and she had an ancestral home that she had inherited. She left her order to do what she wanted, and she's doing wonderful stuff just in our backyard with orphans. There was a sister in the college variety in Carmel College who did the same thing. So there is this, there are many such examples of being suffocated with the burden of wanting to convert and not really doing, God's work, if one can say it that way. So I think Margaret is spot on over there, kind of thing. Does anyone like to go? Say anything? Well, when we cut off, I was talking about Angola and about the whole African, like the little, this whole African part of the novel brings in a little bit of confusion. Xavier spoke about it. And also when the novel begins, it begins in Angola during the Civil War, which is after Angola won its independence in 1975. When she talks about Mary Magdalene landing in Luanda, there's a reference to the liberation of Goa and the opinion poll, so it is 1961, 1969. She doesn't make it very clear when it is. Okay, Luanda, Angola is clearly after 1975, probably the late 70s. And that sits well with the timeline in terms of pagan Maria's, whole lifeline. Then again, there is one thing which, is like, I haven't really been able to figure it out. But she talks about, when she talks about Big Mama, running the farm, she talks about her being so generous and giving away food to the poor people during the Depression. Now, the Depression is 1930s. So where is the whole timeline? That clearly I found it, to be very difficult to wrap my head around. That is very, very, and in a piece of historical narrative, which this usually is, that is something which should have been sort of sorted out. Okay, but again, as I said, as everybody agrees, her narrative skills and her language skills are really superb. Did anyone like to go about anything else? Yeah, Savia's talking.
I was very uncomfortable.
You're not unmuted yet. You're not unmuted.
Okay. Okay. I was very uncomfortable with the development of the character of God. Because I think Margaret has had a lot of her life spent elsewhere, And if you've lived in Goa, you understand the hierarchies, the Batkar-Mundkar link, particularly at the time she's talking of. That is the time when Alma comes and snatches the two children. And with regard to, say like sexual relations, God is a character whom I think is like supercalifragilistic, painted outside of his social class. You see, he's like, he's all over the village with his sex. Everybody talks about his sexuality. He starts howling like a wolf in the night when his wife dies. And, he's kind of had 6 children with this woman, of which only one boy has survived, because as soon as a child is born, he starts his sexual act all over again. So having lived here and having seen this kind of relationship, I think it was a very subjugated relationship. Unless you had a hero growing out of that class, I would be very reticent to create a character larger than life like this. Then suddenly this half African woman, I forget her name, what it is, she falls for him. She's like, she's like shaking like a leaf when she sees him, because I'm not at all attracted to his sexuality. He's some kind of a heathen, terrible fellow. And she's kind of shaking, she's like Sita, she's literally like her mercury is up. And then she has this sexual relationship with him. And as soon as that has happened, he realizes she conceives, he's off the radar, and he says, no, I don't want the kid, abort it. So he takes her on as his woman. He feels the loneliness of the night or whatever, as if I can put it. And at the same time, he just chucks her out, you see. And then there is a falling out. And then when he sees the children, he says, no, they're not my children. They're fair, they're light, he kind of, they're outside of him. He doesn't want to care for them. And then this woman is, kind of develops an attachment to the children, and she's disconsolate, and she kind of goes away from him. And then later on, he tries to he steals the children, keeps them in a cave, and tries to bargain with the family. Now, if he comes from the Mundkar class, I wonder why she created this character to begin with. Because as soon as he comes in, he grows larger than life. He's like a Aladdin, a genie coming from Aladdin's lamp. He's so larger than life, and then suddenly he vamooses the goddess, kind of just takes him away. And Alma says, I would have had to face, the police regarding his, and again, I can't understand Alma's character, why she takes off her shirt, why she gets into that heroic act. I mean, this class thing, the narrative is not very clear on that. It has created these patterns, which are fascinating as a story you read. But if you look at it, you just wonder, why is she creating these kind of magnificent creatures? Why Alma? Why does she take off her clothes? I mean, it's a question I'd like to discuss and ask you. She hides the gun somewhere and her shirt is off. And later on, when the police find her, they actually wrap her with something and give her back to her mother. I would like to know. And then also this creation of this Gorgod. Gorgod actually means thunderbolt. Why did Margaret create a character like that, a thunderbolt, if she wanted to destroy him so quickly? And what was the whole point of that development? You see, into a subaltern Goan class where, Gorgod is created, then he engages with this half African woman, they have children together, and then suddenly he fuses out, in a way that not a scent is left, and the African goddess takes her. I mean, how does one place this within the narrative?
Yes. Would anyone like?
Yeah, respond to that. Let me mute myself.
Talk, Rahul. Talk.
Yeah. No, Roxanne's mic was off. Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to respond to that, Savia and Roxanne. See, what I feel is, yeah, I found it kind of disturbing that who's this character and all that. I agree with Savia, but I would still go with it, because see, that's the independence of the writer. I mean, the writer is a creative artist, as you all know it better. So I think I'm still giving it to her, allowing Margaret to do what she did. But I think it's stemming from that African, folk tales that she knows. And I mean, as a writer, Margaret knew, she had studied African literature, media studies, whatever. But the point is that her knowledge is, she knows a little about Africa and African folk tales and folk stories. So I think maybe it's coming out of there, that whole thing about a person gorilla-like or larger than life or big, for that matter, and doing what he did. And then there is a Black Panther, which is again, more to do with, African jungles or whatever, and that scene is more like I don't know how much of that is in Goa, because yes, our jungles, our forests are quite intimate and interesting. But I'm just saying, a cave and then a Black Panther gobbles him up and all that. So I found that quite, interesting. Also, the fact that, Alma without her shirt or whatever, I think she wants to see right through. Margaret has got a, in her style of writing, there's a sensuous streak, right through from start to end. She's not, she's unafraid of bringing out sexual or addressing sexuality or sexual encounters. She's quite vivid in her descriptions also, about the sexual encounters. And she's very, she handles it very well, actually. The way she explains a sexual encounter. So here, a young lady, bare-chested, and with all this police or army or whatever men, looking at her, and then she says, those men were so affected by that, then they made passionate love to their wives successively.
Yeah.
It is fine, maybe a little over the top, but the
Over the
point is
top.
she has driven home the point as to what the men must have felt. But they were all reined in because there was a captain with a gun leading them, and who was a gentleman, in that sense. So that they couldn't take any liberties. They would be shot first, I guess. But the point is that it also shows the sexuality and sensuousness of Alma as a young lady who didn't care about all that. Her objective was to save the children, which she did in great style.
Yes.
And that why did she show Alma so strong and powerful? Because she's got a feminist streak also, Margaret, which Savia explained earlier as to how Margaret was in real life. So that comes through also. All our women characters are so strong, and the men are not as strong as the women, if you notice, in all her
Yes,
characters.
absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I still, I think it is interesting that. So I think authors should bring in this element of, like a spin, Savia. They should
Yeah.
bring in a spin, that.
Yeah, but you almost can predict now that's going to happen because when she's swimming, she can feel the animal swimming with her. Can I be heard? I don't know. I'm not muted, but
No, you're okay.
yeah, okay. So it's almost, predictable because you're expecting. That's what I mean. I think someone said they didn't expect the end, but it was very predictable because I was just waiting for that. There's whole talk about green eyes and fair skin. It was so obvious, that they're going to be talking about. And talking about Leandro being her favorite, and he could never do anything wrong, and she always covering up for this son, which is something which is we see it happening all around. But it's very sure that there's going to be some kind of this Leandro story coming in. And I don't know, I think it was just convenient to get the panther in from Africa to a river in Goa and, finish off this character. Okay, so interestingly, I remember when Skin first came out, a lot of students and a lot of colleges, they worked on Skin for a TY project. And as far as the teenagers were concerned, this was the story the part of the book that they liked the best. Okay, so she's appealing to that age group, maybe. Yeah. Anyone else has anything to say? Yeah, sure. Rujita.
Yeah, it's not just about that age group. I don't know. It should appeal to everyone, right? I mean, having having to read a strong woman character. Even that whole incident was very gripping, right? You couldn't stop reading till you knew what was going to happen. And okay, now this setup is so strong, and now let's see what happens. Is she going to get shot, or is she going to hurt herself, or is she going to kill him? And then the panther comes in. It was lovely. That whole just like everything else didn't have that kind of heart racing or like a filmy masala element to it.
Okay,
But
so that's good.
this part was, and it's lovely to read, like Rahul pointed out now, feminist literature used in this manner to bring out this character. Really enjoyed it. The other part also where you talk about the clues that were given, Gina says in the hospital, she says, something about Leandro, she says, you was child or to that effect. And she thinks she's mishearing, or she says that she's disoriented and therefore she makes that mistake. But Gina hasn't made a mistake. She knows exactly what she's saying. And that's the clue that I think that was the first time that I was like, okay, this is going and heading somewhere there, but I don't know how it's going to be connected. Probably that. Yeah.
She calls her Leandro's daughter instead of Francisco's daughter.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah. Anyone else? Would you like to say anything? We have time still. It's only 7:30. I think not enough people.
Tamara has joined now. Maybe she came in from some other meeting, but that's interesting. I think she's read the book. So
yeah,
let's
there was Damodar Mauso's book release, I think, at 5:30. So maybe some people will join in. So let's have Tamara. Hi, Tamara.
Hi, can you
Are you
hear me?
one little? Yes, you're
I'm
loud
sorry,
and
I'm
clear.
getting running from meetings to meetings today, and my last one got over like so late. Oh God. And I'm sorry. So I have no idea what's going on. So someone will have to fill me up. And
Okay, hi, yeah, yeah.
I'm reading the right book, right? I don't even know whether I'm reading the right book for the month.
Yes, you are reading the right book. Savya, would you like to go? Because I don't know Tamara. You would like to fill Tamara in into what we've been talking about? No. Hi, Tamara. So we've been talking about the book. We started at about 6:45, and in between we broke off. And you can see, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, other than you. So that's only the 5 of us who have really, and Dr. Preeti, who's
We
not
are
there up on the
eight of
screen
us
anymore.
totally now.
Oh, we are 8 of us.
Oh,
Okay. So
okay.
somebody else has joined in. Yeah. And we've been talking about different people, all of them talking about their take on the novel, right? And yeah, so we've spoken about a few things, but you feel free to just jump in and say what you would like to talk about, and like, dislike.
Okay, sorry, let me just get comfortable. I'm sorry, it's been a long day.
No
but
problem.
What do I say about the book? First of all, I really enjoyed the book. I didn't know what to expect going into the book. But one of the first things that struck me was that it was I don't know whether, because I've really not been up to date with the group also. So I don't know whether this was a choice that was actually made, keeping in mind with the whole Black Lives movement that's been going on. But it was such an apt book for not our political condition, but the world's political condition in general. Like skin is such a big issue. I'm just going to ramble on a little bit and about
Yes,
the thoughts.
please.
The thoughts that just kind of came to me. One of the things that I felt a little sad about, but which did come up, was how the entire world, including India, a country which has brown skin, just looked at this African continent and decided that, oh, just because they had darker skin than us, it is our right to kind of, make them our slaves. I mean, we have this color skin. How could we look at them and consider that, oh, it's okay to make them slaves? So that was one thing that I just thought, because for the longest time, the entire slave movement was mostly a very Western concept. It was like the British and the Americans who were doing it and colonizing. But here I'm reading about, Goa's history with it, which obviously we all knew about it, but it never really kind of made me think so much about it. So I said, okay, that was one thing. It was an interesting storytelling format because there was so much of back and forth and so many generations. And for a minute, I actually thought about 100 Years of Solitude, because I'm like, oh my God, another book with like these generations and generations and generations that I have to like keep and all with the same names. So I need to like figure out all these names. But yeah, that is there. So that was interesting. I found the writing quite, how do you say, it was in some parts storytelling, because a lot of it actually is storytelling and traditions, and in some parts are personal recounting of incidents, which I thought it would be initially I thought it would be jarring, but she managed to do it pretty well. I mean, she managed to actually bridge. There was no bit where I was completely lost in the book, except for this one bit where the kids go through that where they jump into the painting. It was like a surreal thing where they jump into the painting and that happened. So I was a little lost at that bit. I didn't know whether it was real or not, because I didn't expect that from a book like this. But other than that, I thought the storytelling was nice. The book was nice. Yeah, as and when something comes up, I will put it out on the table. But y'all can go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Tamara. That was nice. Yeah. So that bit of magic that she brings in, I think she's trying to work on this whole African, connection with magic and folklore. We were just before you came in, we were talking about the panther that conveniently comes and takes, Gorgor away. So we were just talking about that, and sort of she started in the very early in the book. She's talked about the entire African legend about the goddess, and then forgot about it for a long time, except for the black, figurine in the stone that figure. So I think just brought the panther in to take Gorgor away. Yeah. So please jump in later. And Savya, want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a small reference. Whether Alma takes off her clothes to actually bring in the connection with the navel, the lack of the navel in her body, and that with the small children. Yeah, and that becomes a kind of link, and it also becomes a body, this thing which connects power And I just thought that maybe that possibility exists. That's why she kind of derobes her. That becomes a talisman to power. How she takes control of the situation, or is there a link between the jaguar coming and the whole exposure of the body, because that, I think, essentially explains the African connection, right?
Yeah,
The missing body part.
Yeah, the part missing body part. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, that she brings that in for sure. Just to say that we might get cut off. Tamara, you just come, but we might get cut off. But please join again because Rahul will initiate the meeting once again. Yeah. Would anyone want to say something until then? Stanley, I can see you.
Yeah, I'll 1 minute. The Flavia did raise that point about this fellow's sexuality, that larger than life image of him as Rahul correctly called it, the gorilla type. But apparently, having raised him to that level, there was a need for him to be finished off as fast as possible. Okay, because as you said correctly, he has that sexuality, he has that huge figure, and then suddenly he is nothing after the child is born, and he's got like nothing left. He's all diffused. And then what do you do with such a character? And I think E.M. Foster's what that craft of the novelist. There he says that when an author finds a character not quite convenient, he kills him comfortably.
Craft of fiction.
Yeah, something. I don't remember the name of the book. So this one is killed, but unfortunately, I find it very, very, very clumsy kind of ending to that person. I mean, just conveniently, a panther comes out of nowhere, and it's. I thought it was quite clumsy. Very clumsy.
I think it had a lot of layers to that, because one, first of all, he just realizes that the twins have also a nipple missing, which is when he realizes that they are actually his children, right? So it's just before he can even accept that his lineage and everything that he believed was true, like he didn't even get a chance to like accept it or even enjoy that one moment of, oh, these are my kids and all that. Because for him, I think his story arc was the entire thing of he had 6 children and all 5 of them died off, and then there was this one child. So having like 2 more children that he didn't accept, and then he didn't get a chance to accept just because of his blindness. I think that was one. And also the panther, I think, also goes back to the legend. So his wife kind of, I read it as she kind of incarnated the panther and sent him out there, right? So
Yes.
I found that as the connection there, with like that closed the arc there of that kind of story.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Anyone like to break off and come back so we can think about what I have poem by Margaret
That
called
will be
Helicopters
interesting.
and Lace. I can read that later if we have time. Rahul, go on.
Yeah, I mean, like we've been speaking about the African connection. I throughout the novel, as I've said earlier, I found this very interesting. Her bringing in, because there are half African characters in the to begin with, full African, as the first Angolan slave who comes in, the lady, and then of course as you go along it's half African. But whatever it is, that whole African connection with Portuguese Goa, and her explanation of their traditions, that's been brought out very, very well. So I found that, especially I found it very touching about that Perpetua. That, I mean, I'll speak about Perpetua. I'll speak about her later because there's a paragraph I might want to read. That whole her end. It's so tragic, really, and then she's brought it out very, very well. It's very touching, and she's she a lot of emotions in the way she wrote that whole chapter.
Yeah, definitely. Her writing is very passionate and compassionate to her characters, and this whole Goa's connection with slavery is really so well hidden. For the longest time, I mean, I've lived here now for 33 years, but it's only recently that that I've come to know about about this whole slave trade and the slave connection with Goa and Daman. There were always this African tribe that lives right a little outside Goa, and but it was not. Even now I don't know whether they are descendants of the Siddhis, but they're different. Are they descendants of the slave trade, or they were just brought in as my immigrant labor? So I'm
There
not
are
very
several
clear about that.
explanations. One of them is
No,
that they were brought into.
you're not unmuted. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can't be heard.
They were brought in to build the churches as labor.
Goals working in banks and things like that. But this whole side of the whole African connection is completely, blanket is pulled over it. It's completely, negated. In fact, if you talk about African blood, somewhere else once before there was some discussion about how much of African blood there is among everybody in Goa. They will completely deny it. Okay, then complete denial about that.
Also, there are very interesting links between the Jesuits and their hand in slave trade. This is what perhaps legitimizes the involvement of Goans in slave trade. Because if the church is doing it and they were such avid churchgoers, they also kind of fall into it. Like there was a family in Odlim. They have a huge house. It is called the Prazeres house. Even now, there's a family called the Dias family living there, but it's a palatial mansion at the 4 road crossing. Or those of you who are interested can see it anytime. They were slave traders, and I remember my grandmother telling me that locally they hated them because they used to leave beads for the Africans. And later on, when they would go into hiding, and when they came to pick up the colorful beads, they would seize the women and the men and bring them as slaves. And there was such an embargo about, having contacts with that family by others who were good Catholics, that they would not even pick fruits from their orchard. They had a huge plantation in Orlim and a huge house. But they were like hated by local Catholics because they felt they were doing something that was very against their religion, dealing in human beings. So they would not even, they would have guavas on their property, which nobody picked because of the family's involvement in slave trade. And the other thing was there was a large movement of slaves to build the churches, which were, after the building of the churches, they were disbanded. A lot of Ethiopian slaves were also brought. Then the second thing, there were large slave armies which were brought to defend Goa at different crucial points of time when they felt that there would be an attack by the English, there would be an attack by the French. So they would, they would protect the peripheries. So I think the slave connection with Goa is also this. Then the other thing is they would bring in orphans de re. These were women who were actually supported by royal dowries, and they would bring them to Old Goa in one of the convents, St. Monica's, I think, and keep them there. And local elites, men especially, would actually choose some of these girls as their brides, and they would get a huge dowry. So the first phase you have when the Muslims are defeated, you have the first phase where a lot of the Muslim women are given as wives to the Portuguese, who are there after the winning of the war. But at the second phase, a lot of Goan elites, get married to these women, and many of them have, African blood, though they may appear fair-skinned and all, they have a percentage of African blood. And very often you find this surfacing in some families. For example, in my family, if you see, I find a lot of features that come which are African, and nobody talks about this. There's a very interesting book which talks about, white skin and the layers that lie below it. And for example, a lot of the Nawabs of Andhra Pradesh, they would marry fair women and, lighten up, and they would kind of this thing. But there were also layers where you had darker skinned people being amalgamated into that and in the production of fairness.
Very interesting, Savya. And also, I believe there's a lot of Arab blood, especially from Diwar and the Arab horse traders who stayed back, especially when the monsoons broke and they couldn't. So a lot of the aquiline nose and green light eyes and also are attributed to that. And that is also something that is pushed under the carpet. Rahul, you wanted to say something and you said you wanted to read out a bit. Would you like to go?
Yeah, okay. Which she's written it so evocatively, yeah, it's in quotes here. So that there's somebody who's telling the story. So Dom Bernardo had her bound to her dying husband and had them both thrown into a deep rubbish pit covered by an iron grill. A few crusts of bread were tossed into the pit each day, and dirty water was poured in from a vessel in which dishes had been rinsed. As Perpetua was still bound, she had to catch whatever nourishment she could by turning her face up towards the opening of the pit. Once that brute Costa filled the water vessel with his own urine and poured that into the pit. So, and it goes on, and right down to her death and the death of her husband. It's very tragic because just 2 pages earlier, she's talking about a happy, marriage and happy life, which completely turns on its head, thanks to that owner, the landowner. So the way Margaret goes from one situation to the other, the highs and the lows, that keeps you engaged, to the book. It's right through, chapter after chapter. She keeps you completely in her grip, which is again full marks to her, really.
Yeah, that whole incident is really like, the kind of atrocities committed by the American plantation owners or the Jamaican slave owners. You've never heard of that kind of cruelty and that kind of punishment. I had never heard of it ever, and I really don't think. Again, she's trying to, to make it as strong as possible to say how anybody who flouted the rules, how they were treated. Okay. Anyone else would like to say? Yeah, Savya.
What is interesting is Consolação, when she is pregnant with the twins, she keeps having these dreams again and again, where Dom Bernardo, the very man who kind of committed Perpetua and her lover to incarceration, appeals to her. He comes to her in dreams, and he is constantly besieging her about the children. So he suddenly, from a very wicked, he becomes a very benign figure, and then she has these twins. So that, I think that I found that connection very interesting, that over several generations, that whole thing, she introduces a change very nicely by introducing the idea of dreams. That same figure, which is like atrocious and a slave driver, then becomes redeemed as a very benign figure. I think that's on page. Yeah, it's on page 121 in the old edition. I'll read it out to you. Throughout her pregnancy, her unclaimed godfather, Dom Bernardo, visited her in her dreams, his arms outstretched beseechingly. Just before completing her 9th month, Consolação gave birth to light-skinned twins. That's it.
I was just going to say that I think the writer in many ways has played with this whole lineage idea so well. And, I mean, it's also the whole parallel between the lineage of, I've forgotten all the names also now, just imagine. So so Consuelo's lineage should have been actually she is the granddaughter after all, right?
Yes.
And Alma was that time, yeah. So, and Donna Alma is not the official granddaughter. So this entire interplay of how the two families are so closely connected, and how like just being born on the wrong side of the sheet, as they say, the parallel lineage and still different stories that come down. So there's one side that gets the pure African power, or the goddess powers, and they get the dreams and everything, and the other side that's got this entire history and slave trading and the guilt that has been inherited. So that is cool. So also another, when you say Don Bernardo kind of pleads, again another instance of where it's his only chance at a lineage, an official lineage. So he actually wants those twins to be born. So another instance. Again, a lot of lineage. I see a lot of that come through in the book in various storylines. Also, there is a point where Pagan says that, at one point she and her maid, what is her name, could have been cousins, right? Could have been related at one point. She kind of regrets that. Yeah, Esperanza. Yeah, could have been cousins. Yeah, so that was also quite nice, very interesting.
Yes. And it is the strong women who, when they protect, Gina, Donna, Gabriella both wants to protect Pagan, that, they manage to get the illegitimate and, carry on the lineage and stuff like that. So if you don't have a patron goddess kind of thing looking after you, or a mother, then you are lost. That's very much true there.
In fact, that goddess aspect is also when the children, when they are also trying to jump into the painting again, even they're just kids and they probably have not heard of all these legends. And even then they immediately, they don't think of a god at that point. They think of a goddess that they need to appeal to jump into the thing. Yeah.
It's the innate appeal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone? Like anyone to go?
Where are the men?
Savya is asking, where are the men? Oh, there's Rahul is there, Stanley is there. Somebody wants their take on her, how she attacks the aristocracy and, the patriarchal order. Savya was saying something.
No.
Not that, but something else you were saying.
No.
Yeah. There was a lot of controversy about locally about this book. Whether it should be considered as a Goan writer, as Margaret as a Goan writer or a non-Goan writer. Margaret herself, whenever the book was kept in a section of Goan writers, said, what is this doing here? I'm not a Goan writer. Put me in the other shelf. Somebody was recounting that kind of thing. And whether she should be considered as a Goan writer. And there's been a lot of debate about that. Would anyone like to pick that up? Of course, she was American by citizenship, okay? And generally, when we classify writers today, we don't go by the subject matter. We go by, citizenship and where the book is published. And, so Rohinton Mistry is a Canadian writer, okay? Bharati Mukherjee and our American Nakshi Mukherjee or our American writers, so... Yeah.
Half of India has not got that memo, because even if you've come to India once or had some great grandfather, you are an Indian, whatever. You're Indian American, Indian Canadian. So we have very strong claims to our people who are famous.
Yeah, but that will happen. The subject matter is, what is dear to your heart and what is the struggle within. Like, probably you talked about that. No, I think Fiona talked about that.
Yeah.
Struggle for identity and all of that. And that also comes from, obviously the author is also, struggle from moving from one place to the other. And so that way there is a deep connection in that sense. Yeah. Samya, want to say something?
Yeah, interestingly, the rest of India, you talk of them as Indian writers. But Goans, you talk of them as Goan writers. Probably the difference is that you have had a Portuguese connection And for India, the rest of it has been a British connection. Okay. But having said that, can you hear me? Okay. Something has happened. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. Having said that, I would not like to be called a Goan writer. I'm telling a story that comes from Goa, but I'm not a Goan writer, because the sensibilities that I use as a writer, the narratives that I use as a writer, I borrow from a larger this thing. I think when you call yourself a Goan writer, you ghettoize your entire identity. And that ghettoized identity looks at stories in a particular format, which I somehow don't really like as a writer. Treat me as a writer, treat me on par as an Indian writer. I don't want to be called a Goan writer. The story may be emanating from Goa, but that's it. I'm an Indian writer. The other thing is also, you notice this whole trend globally. Like, for example, African painters, when they are young, when they are unknown, they will show in their work in the Museum of African Art. But as soon as they get recognized as painters, they don't want that identity tag that they're African painters. They would like to have a larger playing field as painters. So I think the same analogy applies here, where you want to be treated as a writer, an Indian writer. You tell stories of a particular place, but you don't want to be constricted by the identity of and the locale and the landscape of these stories, because you want your work to be examined in a larger critical format.
Thank you, Savya.
Yeah.
That was very eye-opening sharing, because it's
Roxanne, please unmute.
yeah. Can I be heard now?
Yeah.
I was just complimenting Savia on her on the way she sees, even those who write in Goa, may live in Goa. And today, lots of writers are living in Goa, and lots of writers writing about Goan themes, and that's really wonderful. Your sentiments I completely endorse, and it's diametrically opposite to what is actually happening in Goa in the academic circles and academia, and all. It's completely irritates, disgusting, because they are endorsing this ghettoization for some kind of browning points, because the pool is tiny, the pool is small, and in that, it's just like you scratch my back, I scratch mine, and it's really irritating and not doing us any good. So that's really nice. It's really wonderful to hear you say that. I'm thrilled by that sentiment. Yeah. Tamara?
I just have a question, because in fact, this was something that I thought about, and I didn't really get too much time to research. But how much of a story is actually inspired by life? Like, I know very little about Margaret Mascarenhas, except that she has some kind of Goan connection, and she did live in Goa for a while. That was it. But if any of you all know, was there actually, is it actually fiction, or is it
I think only
inspired?
Savia will be able to tell you about that. But I just like to make the disclaimer. It doesn't really matter. We are approaching this book as a book of fiction.
No.
Okay?
It doesn't matter. But
It doesn't really
it's
matter.
interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I love to know,
So
like,
she
is
has,
it actually
So
how much of it?
Savia, you would like to say, because
I'll respond to it more as a writer, because your first book, your first novel, especially if it's written at the age of 28, it draws a lot from your personal experiences. Margaret did have a Goa connection, a Daman connection, and a South American connection, because her mother is South American. But beyond taking these locales of America and Daman and Goa, I think she did it for convenience, because she understood those landscapes well. I don't know if, personal details of her personal life went into it. Very often, you like to blur that. I do it in my work. I don't want to show whether a story is part of my story. It's a writer's technique. Sometimes you want to show a story as part of your story, your life story. Because like Tamara rightly asked the question, it creates an interest in the reader. Was this her life? Because besides being a reader, you're also getting into somebody's skin. You see? So that is a writer's prerogative to keep that playing field open, whether you want to show it as your story or you don't want to show it as your story. And sometimes I was watching a film the other day. Very often you tread on both the grounds to be able to just leverage your work.
Yeah. And as a first novel, you know, a first novel is, whether it's this one, whether it's Arundhati Roy, God of Small Things, you know, a first novel it's inevitable that, you know, you are writing, after all, a writer is writing in a time, space, and milieu. And, you know, it will be, you know, and once you've done away with it, and the first novel, which is when I started, I said that it is really, this real sad thing is we didn't really see her, you know, really grow into the promise that she held as a writer was still to come. And she went very young, you know, and she really grew. I mean, her second novel, The Disappearance of Irene Dos Santos, is very well written and very much more skillfully written in terms of form and structure. Triage is a book of poems, basically. And she had a third novel which she had started writing. It was actually, I think, set in Beirut. There was a working title called Just Another Car Bomb. Okay, the book she was working on, which has great promise. I don't know whether there is a manuscript or whether, you know, it's gone into the sunset with her. Yeah. Would anyone else like to say something? Okay, I have a poem from Triage, you know, called Helicopters and Lace. I just said if we, this is called Margaret by Margaret Mascarenhas. And it's interesting, it's got to do with this whole strong mother theme. It is her father, not her mother, who chooses her toys, airplanes, race cars, trains, and helicopters. It is her father who chooses her clothes, diaphanous fairy ballerina dresses, patent leather shoes, socks of lace made by nuns that tie just above chubby knees. Her mother thinks children, irrespective of gender, should have pets, climb trees, and wear comfortable, sturdy play clothes. No, says her father, she should wear only dresses. In winter, tights and leggings are allowed, except when they are visiting her American grandparents on the farm. Her father, outnumbered by in-laws, relents. Even he understands that delicate lace and frills make no sense if his daughter is going to be riding around on a tractor and milking cows with her grandfather, or digging carrots in the garden with her grandmother, or riding in front of her mother on horseback outside his purview. He is not a sportsman. So finally, her mother, has her chance. She must catch her opportunities, if only fleeting, whenever she can, in order to build a daughter who might fly helicopters once she grows up. Okay. And I found this poem interesting because there's this whole talk about the farm and the grandparents having a farm, which is also there in skin. So Siona, there is still something for you to research. Sorry, Tamara, not Tamara, you know, in terms of, you know, how much of her life, okay, has gone into her work. Okay, but
I really am going to go into a rabbit hole after this, I think, because I didn't get a chance to do that. And I was just going to comment earlier that when you write with something, like when you draw inspiration from your life, it's so much harder, right? Because if you're so close to the subject and you don't know what you want to share, and especially if you have subject matter that's really interesting and can be controversial also. So I'm like, yeah, now I have to like read up everything about her. And then I read this really sad thing that she passed away like in 2019. So that was a little this thing. So yeah.
So her American life and her American mother and her grandparents, nobody really knows about in Goa. So maybe there is a story hangs there. And it is so difficult, you know, to bring your life in. And I always think it is so very brave. You know, you have to be very brave to put your life out there. And that first novel really is, you know, your baby kind of thing. And it's the first step. And every time I read a first novel, I'm always wondering, like, God, I mean, I don't have the guts, I am not brave enough to put my life out there, to let everything hang out, because, that's what makes the novel, gripping, so the good, bad, and the ugly. And the ugly is really what catches everyone's attention. So yeah, that is definitely, she has put some of her guts into this novel, and her guts in her gumption. And I think it is really sad that we didn't really see her grow into the thing. And as I said in the beginning, because some of you came in a little later, I think Dr. Preeti also came in later, we didn't have any tribute for Margaret. I don't know why she was glossed over. And she was more of a North figure. I don't know, Bendel was more kind of thing, but this is our tribute to her. Let this be our tribute to her. Maybe you can say, when you put out that YouTube video, Rahul, in memory of Margaret or something like that. You could just have that one
Celebrating Margaret's
life.
life.
Yeah, Savia was talking about celebrating Margaret's life in memoriam or something like that.
Yeah, surely. I'll do that. In fact, I just wanted to, Roxanne, we have about 7 minutes to go, so we'll conclude.
Yeah.
You when you see the timer, you can see the timer.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So
it's 8:21 by my.
So you
watch,
can
yeah.
conclude the session there. But I wanted to just add quickly. This is a very interesting point you brought out about the first novel by any writer, and how it is usually autobiographical, because Savia has mentioned that about Kinta, where you look into your own life or your family to draw inspiration. Jerry Pinto, when he was in discussion with us for M and the Big Whom, said it in as many words, because in the early days he was a little reserved about talking about whether it's autobiographical or not, but now not anymore. So he's very clear.
He's gone braver. He's become braver. Yeah,
absolutely. But if you go back to our YouTube video about the Jerry Pinto session, we were not so refined, in the sense we were not doing Zoom calls. We were doing a Google Meet, and I just have got few video clips. But Jerry, being the articulate man that he is, he very articulate about, he brought it out very well, this how it is, like, to quote him, it's my baby, it's my Jaan, he said, that book is my Jaan, and then I share it with you, and then you make what you want to out of it, but it's my baby and it's my Jaan, to quote him. So it's fascinating, this thing about first time writers, and for people like some of us who have not yet written that book which we want to write, it is very inspirational also.
Yes.
So cool.
Yeah.
So Roxanne, I think I'll leave it to you to conclude.
Well, I think I already almost did that, in terms of the fact that this is dedicated to Margaret. All right. Sure, the novel has a few hiccups about structure, and it's not as the timeline and the family tree is not very easily etched. And so the reader tends to get a little lost, right, in between and things like that. It has a bit of a far-fetched magical element with it, whatever. But I think it is wonderfully written. I think we all agree that what stands out brilliantly is her absolute command and control over language, succinct and very, very graphic and very evocative descriptions. Whether it's Goa, whether it's Angola, whether it's Luanda, whether it's Daman, even the descriptions in Daman, and in America, and with Zico and the affair, whether it's descriptions of relationships, lovers, lovemaking, folklore, she's spot on, she is there, and yes, great to she is strongly feminist. That is really very clear. Her lens is turned on everything. Her lens is turned on religion and nuns, on Christianity, on skin color, of course, that dominates, on the African folklore, on Angola, on also, the fact how colonization and colonialism destroyed ancient ways of life that were actually so close to the land, rooted, and worked so well. She speaks about Saudade also meaning, the longing for a lost way of life, which she is longing for, and yet which she knows, which she is very clearly points out all the flaws. The whole the way the landowners live their lives, and it's gloriously painted in all its beauty and its good and bad, okay, kind of thing. And it is a very interesting novel, sometimes in a bit of a gossipy manner, but still it's a very interesting novel. And as I said, as a first novel, it would have required guts and courage to put it all out there. If at all there are parallels with her life, which I'm sure you will see even when you're doing God of Small Things. That is again a first novel that a soul will has its bit of autograph. Let's just call it an autobiographical element. It's not autobiography, and it's fictionalized. And sometimes it is a quest in the dark to find out, whether these are all autobiographical elements, because they are then colored and coated with so much of fiction and all of that, so that really doesn't really matter. Yeah, lovely to have been with all of you today on this Saturday evening, and hope I'm there again for other readings. It's just that being online for 5 and 6 hours a day is enough to, even on a Saturday evening sometimes to be online. It's just crazy, but now things have settled down a bit at the university and college and all, and I hope to be there again. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Okay,
my side,
well moderated. Good.
8:26 is, we still have 4 minutes. If anybody can...
4 minutes, it's just 1 minute.
Wish you all, it's 1 minute. Okay, it's 8:26 here. Happy weekend. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
All the best.
I'll leave you with one thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely.
That is particularly because Margaret lived the early part of her life in the US, and then made a very conscious choice in her 20s to come and settle down in Goa, whether Goa is really the fertile environment where a writer grows, where a writer finds the right environment to allow his work to grow, get fertile, and develop a community of readers. I mean, how strong was the link with the Goa University? Did her book really get promoted? Very often as a writer, I can comment on this. People say, I meet people, and they say, oh, we loved your writing. Then I ask, I'm very excited about this. And I say, which book did you read? So they'll say, oh, that write-up in the newspaper. Don't you remember? So, Goa needs to build on that. You need to strengthen that, where you build an environment. I mean, I was talking to Australian writers and I was talking to British writers, where actually you have residencies where writers go and meet school children. They meet college children and discuss their work and mentor at the same time, because learning about your work, other younger people get inspired to write. That is sadly lacking in our society, whether it's Goa, whether it's India. Maybe we don't have the